Do you think then, in terms of big business and its impact on Putin at the moment?
Whenever we're looking at sanctions, we need to try to understand what is the possible link between inflicting economic pain on the target and getting the political gain that we want. So what is the mechanism that is going to link any particular withdrawal of economic engagement to the result that we want, i.e. Putin leaving Ukraine? So some of the things that we've seen, it's very implausible that there can be any link between those things. So if Nike pulls out of Russia, so what? That is not going to force Putin to pull out of Ukraine. Some of the more significant sanctions are the banking sanctions. They have had, as you have said, caused a collapse in the value of the ruble and led to a run on Russian banks. They will cause long-run inflation. They've forced up interest rates that will have a long-term depressive impact on the Russian economy. I don't think they're enough to collapse the Russian economy. And above all else, I think Putin prioritizes his political and security goals above economic goals. I think he's priced in the impact of sanctions into his plans. And at the moment, they don't seem to be deflecting him from his path. No,
they don't appear to. Lee Jones.
I mean, it's been noticeable the way the Russian economy has been run over the course of the last few years. With the benefit of hindsight, it looks like he was moving up to this moment to give himself space. So he's been running at pretty much a budget surplus. He's been reducing the country's debt very significantly. And this puts it in a very strong position, coupled with the fact that an awful lot of countries, particularly in Europe, do depend to a considerable extent on Russian energy exports, particularly gas and oil. Russia is the biggest exporter of oil in the world, third biggest producer. And Europe gets 40% of its gas from Ukraine. So the sanctions have been carved around, leaving a corridor for energy to continue. And that means that certainly as things are at the moment, he's both built up a war chest and he still has money coming in.
But do you think, Malcolm, that if we stop using as much as the Russian gas, that we can actually, if Europe decide, and they could do it quite swiftly, right, surely they could, that they could cut off their dependence and reliance on Russian gas?
To an extent, and I think the European Union yesterday produced a plan that could reduce its dependence on Russian oil by a third over the course of the next year. But when you are 40% dependent on a single country for your imports, other countries around the world can gear up extra production. Right. We're already seeing that in the States and in the Middle East, but not overnight. This will take a matter of several months, if not years. What we saw after the great oil price shocks of the 1970s was that the world energy did actually undergo quite a significant revolution, to the extent that the oil price through the 80s came back pretty much to the price it had been before the great big oil shock. But that did take a decade, but it was extremely effective.
But what about LNG? Isn't that the liquefied natural gas that we could get from, say, Qatar and the United States? And I know that apparently Norway's supply, they couldn't really give any more. But can't we look at other things and other places, like, I think, Turkey and other things, other
Yes, providers? And that's what will happen. Now, clearly the UK is not the only country which is in this position, actually. We are relatively independent of Russian gas directly. Only about 5% of our gas imports are from Russia. And already about a seventh of our total gas use, so that's about a quarter of our imports, comes in on the basis of liquefied natural gas, largely, as you say, from Qatar. The States is the new kid on the block in terms of gas exports, liquefied natural gas exports. They undoubtedly have capacity to increase. But then we've got the issue of what about the size of the terminals? You do need specialist ports. We have a very large one in Milford Haven in Wales, but we would probably need to build 2 or 3 more. And there's also environmental questions about shipping gas around the world. They leak, these tankers, to an extent. Methane, natural gas, are much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So there are significant downsides to it. But I've no doubt that all of these things we will see happening over the course of the next few months and years.